The iPhone camera shook as Tanner held it up, zooming in on the old man's chest. "Dude, check this out," he whispered to his friends, barely containing his laughter. "This guy's wearing some knockoff war metal from Amazon." The park bench creaked under the weight of the elderly veteran as he sat perfectly still. His weathered hands rested on his knees. The afternoon sun caught the bronze surface of his medal, casting tiny rainbows across the faded ribbon. "Stolen valor much?" Madison said, loud enough for everyone within 20 feet to hear. She flipped her hair and crossed her arms. "My dad says guys like this buy fake medals online to get free coffee." The veteran's shoulders didn't move. His gray eyes stayed fixed on the duck pond ahead. A mother duck led her babies toward the water's edge. They moved in perfect formation. Jake laughed so hard he nearly dropped his energy drink. "Bro, look at that thing. It's probably made of chocolate." He stepped closer, his voice getting louder. "Hey, old man, where'd you get that costume jewelry?" The veteran's jaw tightened, just barely, like a fault line shifting before an earthquake. "Leave him alone," Emma said softly, but her friends weren't listening. They were too busy making TikTok content, too busy being cruel for clicks. Tanner zoomed in closer. The medal hung from a red, white, and blue ribbon that had seen better days. The edges were frayed. The colors had faded to pastels, but the weight of it pulled the old man's shirt down in a way that seemed to bend his entire body forward. "I bet he can't even name what war this is supposed to be from," Madison announced. She walked right up to the bench, her designer sneakers squeaking against the concrete. "What's your story, Grandpa? Vietnam? Korea? Or did you just watch too many war movies?" The ducks stopped moving. Every single one. They floated motionless on the water like someone had hit pause on the world. Asterisk, the veteran's name was Harold Chun. He was 78 years old. He had been sitting on this exact bench every Tuesday for the past 6 years, since his wife Margaret died. Since the nightmares got worse. Since the VA hospital became his second home. But these kids didn't know any of that. Harold's fingers found the metal without looking. He rubbed the bronze surface with his thumb. A habit older than most of these children. The metal was warm from his body heat, smooth from decades of the same gentle touch. "Sir," Tanner said, his voice dripping with fake respect, "we're just wondering about your ... decoration there. Seems pretty fancy for what?" Harold spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet, steady, like distant thunder. Jake snorted. "For someone sitting alone in a park feeding ducks, man." "Come on." Harold stood up slowly. His knees popped like firecrackers. He was taller than they expected, broader, even bent with age. He had the kind of presence that made the air feel heavier. "You think I bought this at a pawn shop?" Harold said. "It wasn't a question. I mean ... double quotes." Madison shrugged. "If the shoe fits." Harold nodded once. Then he started walking toward the parking lot. His gait was uneven. His left leg dragged slightly behind his right. But he moved with purpose. "Where are you going?" Emma called after him. Something in her chest felt wrong, like she'd swallowed stones. Harold stopped, turned around. His gray eyes swept across their faces, one by one, memorizing them. "To prove you right," he said. 20 minutes later, Harold returned. He carried a manila folder thick with papers, yellow with age. Some of the edges were burned, water-stained, like they'd survived something terrible. The teenagers were still there, still filming, still laughing about the crazy old man who ran away. Harold sat back down on the bench, opened the folder, pulled out a single photograph. "Here," he said, holding it toward Tanner, "for your video." Tanner grabbed the photo without thinking. Then his smile melted off his face like ice cream in July. The black and white image showed a young soldier, Asian features. Harold's eyes but sharper, angrier. He wore the same medal. But in the photo, it was new. The ribbon was crisp. The bronze gleamed dock behind the soldier stretched endless rice paddies, mountains, and smoke. So much smoke it looked like the world was ending. Vietnam, 1968, Harold said. I was 19. Madison leaned over Tanner's shoulder. Her breath caught. The soldier in the photo couldn't have been much older than they were. Photoshop, Jake muttered, but his voice had lost its edge. Harold pulled out another photo. Then another. A whole stack of them. Young Harold with other soldiers. Young Harold in a hospital bed, his left leg wrapped in bloody bandages. Young Harold receiving the medal from a general whose name was stitched above his pocket, Westmoreland. The Distinguished Service Cross, Harold said. Second highest military decoration for valor. They don't sell these on Amazon. Emma felt her stomach drop into her shoes. Sir, there's more. Harold interrupted. He wasn't looking at them anymore. He was looking through them. Like they were ghosts. You want to know why I got this? Medal, asterisk. The folder held more than photographs. It held newspaper clippings. Military records, medical reports, all of it yellowed. All of it real. Harold spread them across the bench like he was dealing cards. But these weren't cards. These were pieces of his soul. Kisan Combat Base, he said. January 21st, 1968. We were surrounded. 77 days under siege. North Vietnamese artillery fell like rain. His fingers traced the edge of a newspaper clipping. The headline read, Teen Hero Saves Platoon in Vietnam Firefight. I was a radio operator, 22nd Infantry. We got separated from our unit during a night patrol. 15 men. Lost in the jungle. No communication with base. Tanner lowered his phone. The camera was still recording, but he wasn't thinking about TikTok anymore. We walked for 3 days. No food, no water. Jenkins was shot in the gut. Williams had shrapnel in his back. Martinez couldn't feel his legs. Harold pulled out a folded piece of paper. Army letterhead, official seal. The ink was faded but still readable. Then we heard them, enemy patrol, maybe 30 soldiers. We were outnumbered 2-1, wounded, exhausted. Madison sat down on the bench. She didn't ask permission. I had the radio. Our only connection to extraction. But the battery was dying. 1 transmission. Maybe 2 if we were lucky. Harold's voice got quieter. Like he was telling a secret. The choice was simple. Call for my own evacuation. Save myself. Or use the radio to guide an airstrike on the enemy position. Save my men. But someone had to stay behind to call in coordinates. Asterisk Jake had stopped. Laughing completely, he put down his energy drink. Sat on the ground in front of the bench like a student. The enemy was closing in, Harold continued. I could hear them talking, maybe 50 yards away. My sergeant was unconscious. Blood everywhere. The radio crackled. Command came through. Harold opened the military report. His finger found a specific paragraph. The words were typed on an old typewriter. Some letters darker than others. Private Chun volunteered to remain in position and provide targeting coordinates for danger close. Air support while his wounded squad evacuated to the landing zone. Emma's eyes were filling with tears. She didn't understand why. Danger close means the bombs fall so near your own position that you might not survive the blast. The pilots told me over the radio. Son, you sure about this? Those coordinates put you right in the kill zone. Harold's hands were shaking now. Just slightly, like leaves in a gentle wind. I told them I was sure. Then I watched my men disappear into the jungle. Heard the helicopters coming for them, and I waited. The park had gone completely silent. Even the traffic seemed muted. Like the world was holding its breath. The F-4 Phantoms came in low, dropped everything they had. The explosion threw me 20 feet. Shattered my leg. Ruptured my eardrums, but it worked. Enemy patrol eliminated. My men made it home. Harold folded the report carefully. Put it back in the folder. I spent 8 months in the hospital. 3 surgeries. They said I'd never walk normal again. But I walked. Graduated high school late. Used the GI Bill for college. Became a teacher. Tanner's phone was still recording, but he'd forgotten about it completely. You were a teacher? Harold nodded. 42 years, 5th grade. Lincoln Elementary, 3 blocks from here. He pulled out one more item from the folder. A class photo. Dozens of small faces smiling at the camera. Harold stood in the back row, younger but recognizable. The medal wasn't visible in the photo, but the man wearing it was unmistakably the same person. I never told my students about Vietnam. Never mentioned the medal. They just knew me as Mr. Chun, the guy who helped them with math, who stayed after school when their parents worked late, who bought lunch for kids who forgot their money. Madison was crying now. Silent tears that she didn't bother wiping away. After I retired, I started coming here. Margaret and I used to feed the ducks. After she died, Harold's voice cracked. I kept coming, kept feeding them. Felt like someone should. Emma stood up abruptly, walked to her car. Came back with a tissue box. Double quotes, Mr. Chun, she said softly. I think my little brother had you as a teacher. Tommy Martinez. He's 16 now. Harold's eyes brightened. Tommy, sweet kid. Terrible. At multiplication tables, he talks about you all the time. Says you were the best teacher he ever had. Says you believed in him when nobody else did. Harold smiled for the first time since they'd met him. How is he? Honor roll. Every semester. Wants to be an engineer. Good for him. Asterisk Jake was staring at the newspaper clipping. The headline. The grainy photo of a young soldier in a hospital bed. Sir, this says you saved 15 men. 14, Harold corrected. Jenkins didn't make it. Died on the helicopter. I think about him every day. Tanner finally stopped recording. Put his phone in his pocket. We're really sorry, Mr. Chun. We had no idea. Harold waved him off. How could you? You see an old man alone in a park. You make assumptions. It's human nature. But it's wrong, Madison said. She was still crying. We were horrible to you. You were young, foolish. There's a difference. Emma sat down next to Harold. Can I ask you something? Why did you come back with the folder? You could have just left. Harold was quiet for a long time. The ducks had resumed their swimming. The mother was teaching her babies to dive for food. Because, he said finally, you reminded me of my students. Capable of being better than your worst moments. Asterisk, what happened next would stay with each of them for the rest of their lives. Tanner deleted the video, without posting it. Without showing anyone. Just erased it like it never existed. Madison called her father, right there in the park. Told him she'd learned something important about veterans, about respect, about assumptions. Jake asked Harold if he could shake his hand. When Harold extended his arm, Jake noticed the numbers tattooed on his wrist, small, faded, a different story from a different war. Harold's father had been in a Japanese internment camp during World War II. My family fought for this country while being treated like enemies, Harold said quietly. Every generation has their battles. Emma asked the question they were all thinking. What can we do to make this right? Harold considered this. Tell people, not about me, about all of us. The old men and women you see sitting alone. We all have stories. Some served in war, some served in other ways. Teachers, firefighters, nurses, parents who worked 3 jobs to feed their families. He stood up slowly, gathered his papers. Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind. Asterisk 6 months later, Emma started volunteering at the VA hospital, reading to patients, listening to stories, learning names. Madison organized a Veterans Day assembly at her high school. She invited Harold to speak. He accepted. Tanner used his social media platform differently, started sharing stories of service, not for clicks, for connection. Jake changed his major from business to social work, said he wanted to help people who'd been invisible too long. And Harold? Harold kept feeding the ducks every Tuesday. But now he wasn't alone. The bench was bigger, somehow. Room for conversations, room for questions, room for understanding. The phi medal still hung from his neck, still caught the afternoon sun. But now sometimes children would ask about it, politely, respectfully, and he would tell them, not the whole story, just enough to plant seeds. Seeds of respect, seeds of curiosity, seeds of the understanding that every person carries more than what you can see. Harold Chun died 2 years later, peacefully, in his sleep. The way heroes deserve to go. His funeral was packed. Students from 40 years of teaching, veterans from 3 different wars, and 4 young people who had learned the most important lesson of their lives on a park bench. The mayor spoke. The principal of Lincoln Elementary spoke. A general flew in from Washington to present the flag to Harold's nephew. But the most powerful moment came when Tanner, Madison, Jake, and Emma stood together at the podium. They told the story, the real story, about judgment and redemption, about the weight of service, about the danger of assumptions. They talked about the moment when mockery became respect, when ignorance became understanding, when 4 kids learned that heroism doesn't always announce itself with fanfare, that sometimes it sits quietly on a park bench, feeding ducks, carrying invisible wounds and untold stories. Sometimes it wears a faded medal and waits patiently for the world to see beyond the surface. Sometimes it teaches 5th grade math and stays after school with forgotten children. Sometimes it just needs someone to ask the right questions. Harold's medal was donated to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. But first, it spent a week in the display case at Lincoln Elementary. Next, to a handwritten sign that read, Mr. Chun, teacher, hero, friend. He believed in us when nobody else did. The ducks still swim in the pond. Children still play in the park. And somewhere an old man's voice whispers across the years, everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind. The weight of honor isn't in the medal. It's in the choice to carry it quietly. It's in the decision to serve without recognition. It's in the wisdom to teach through forgiveness. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, it's in the moment when strangers become family on a park bench, learning that respect isn't given to uniforms or decorations. It's given to the human spirit that endures, serves, and loves despite everything the world throws at it. That's the weight of honor. That's the lesson of the medal. That's why heroes never really die. They just teach us how to carry the weight ourselves.